Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video today. And today I'm going to be previewing the Houston Texans Week 3 matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is Houston Texans matchup against Jacksonville tomorrow at 12 o'clock in Jacksonville. This game is on Fox, and the Houston Texans will try to get their first win of the season. Although, if some players that I thought would be playing this week were playing, I would think there was a chance for the Houston Texans tomorrow. But ultimately, I really don't know if I think the Texans have a chance to go get this win tomorrow. Although, I think there is a chance for the Texans to win this game. Call me crazy, but this defense is going to bounce back. They're getting back a name like Jimmy Ward, who is going to be a big voice in this locker room and on the defense. I think his appearance for this Texans defense, getting him back, him making his Texans debut, will be big for this defense. Not only that, this defense was terrible against the Indianapolis Colts in Week 2, although they were good in Week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens. They brought good pressure to Lamar Jackson. They came up with 4 sacks, and they had 1 interception, Steven Nelson. They had 1 fumble recovery, which was the second turnover of the day for the Ravens. Tavier Thomas, who's not playing tomorrow, even had another forced fumble on Lamar Jackson. And this one nearly had the 3rd turnover of the day for the Ravens, but the Ravens recovered. The defense against the Ravens in Week 1 looked good. The Ravens only scored 7 points at the first half, and the defense looked really good. And then all of a sudden, Week 2 against the Colts, this defense just goes completely rodeo silent. And I think that this defense is going to be better. I think D'Amico Ryans has prepared them better going into this week, but they're playing a good team. They're playing a really good team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, Travis Etienne, also Christian Kirk. They're going to be without Zay Jones in this game. Zay Jones, Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver, is out. He's been a big part of their offense in the first 2 games. And also Josh Allen, not the quarterback, the defensive end, who has, I think, 3 or 4 sacks in the first 2 games, has been incredible for Jacksonville. And he is questionable in this game for Jacksonville. And what I've been hearing is he's most likely not going to play. So they lose defensive end who's been great for them in the first 2 games, and Zay Jones. So missing those 2 players might really affect them. And they're also could be without guard Brandon Schreif, who his injury is it's not related personal matter and is unspecified. That means he probably will not be playing tomorrow. So they're without 3 starters in this game. Also, defensive back Antonio Johnson is out, and that's really it. And then also defensive back Andrew Wingard is questionable. So they have some injuries, but not as bad as the Houston Texans. Let's go over the Texans injury report in this game. Denzel Perryman, starting linebacker, is out with a hand/wrist injury. Jalen Petrie, who's been out since the first quarter of Week 1, is out with a chest injury. Tavier Thomas broke his hand against the Indianapolis Colts. He's expected to return in a week or 2. He is out. Here, the following players are going to be good to go for tomorrow. They had injuries throughout the week. Tank Dell, George Fant, Jonathan Grenard, Eric Murray. He got a concussion in the first quarter of the Colts game, so the Texans will be getting him back. That will be a good guy to have back on the defense. C.J. Stroud. Lermy Tunsil is out. Jimmy Ward, Robert Woods. They had some injuries throughout the week. Those 2 guys are healthy and good to go tomorrow. And then Derek Stingley Jr. was just placed on the IR, and he will be out. So, I think it's going to depend on how this Texans team does tomorrow. We keep seeing the offense do better by each game. Offensive Week 1, they were only able to put 9 points on the board. And although they were able to put some decent drives, now last week they were able to put 20 points on the board. C.J. Stroud threw for 384 passing yards. Here are some things I think need to be better. Bringing pressure to the opposing team's quarterback, which is something we could barely do to either one of Anthony Richardson or either one of Anthony Richardson or Gardner Minshew last week, which is something we could do against Lamar Jackson in Week 1, which makes no sense to me. Although I think a big reason was the Colts' offensive line. They have a great offensive line, while the Jacksonville Jaguars do not have the best offensive line, and they're without a starter on the offensive line. So I think some of the defensive linemen like John Grenard and Will Anderson Jr. and Sheldon Rankins need to take advantage of a bad offensive line from the Jags, and especially with them being without a starter. And they need to take advantage of that and bring some pressure to Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence struggled last week. The Jags only scored 9 points on offense, scoring 0 touchdowns. I believe this Texans defense needs to get in Trevor Lawrence's face, bring pressure, whether that's Will Anderson Jr., whether that's John Grenard, and they need to be able to stop the run. They were not terrible at stopping the run last week, but they weren't that great either. I think they gave up. Moss, their running back, had 84, 85 rushing yards, but they did give up, I believe it was 3 touchdowns to the rushing touchdown last week. Moss had a rushing touchdown. Anthony Richardson had 2 rushing touchdowns. So I think their run defense needs to be better. Their run defense was okay in week 1. It wasn't terrible, but wasn't great either. Week 1, run defense was solid. Week 2, run defense wasn't terrible, but wasn't good either. It was a mid. So I think their run defense against Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby needs to be better than it was last week against Zach Moss, which that might be hard to do. I think C.J. Stroud needs to keep this offense in the game. And they need, and a big thing I believe will be a big factor into this game for the Texans is scoring points in the red zone, scoring touchdowns in the red zone, because they're in the red zone a total of 3 times last week, and 3 times they settled for field goals. One was they ended up making a 36-yard field goal. The other, I think ended up making a 35-yard field goal, so they were in the red zone. They were at one point they were at the 2-yard line, and a holding and a sack pushed them all the way back. They had to settle for a field goal attempt. At one point they were at, I believe, they're at the 10-yard line. C.J. Stroud took a shot on 3rd and goal and overthrew it. The Texans had to settle for a 27-yard field goal. And then one drive, the Texans were at the 17-yard line, and Stroud got sacked. And then the Texans had to settle for I believe it was a 46-yard field goal that Kaimi Fairbairn got blocked on. So this Texans team needs to be better in the red zone tomorrow and scoring touchdowns in the red zone, because there was multiple chances the Texans had to put points on the board, and I mean 7 points on the board, not 3. There was multiple times. The Texans, if they would have been good in the red zone and scored touchdowns when they should have had, which there was 3 times where they should have scored a touchdown in last week's ball game against the Colts, but instead they scored a field goal. And it's about a score difference of putting 6 points on the board with field goals compared to maybe even putting 21 of touchdowns. It's a 15-point difference, because one of the field goals they took, they didn't even make. So it was a 15-point difference last week, and the Texans could have won that game 35-31 against the Colts if they were able to score touchdowns when they should have had. Silly plays like being at the 2-yard line and being able to score. They actually scored a touchdown at the 2-yard line. C.J. Stroud threw a touchdown pass to Tank Dell on the left side, and there was a stupid holding call. So this offensive line needs to be better with penalties and allowing sacks. This Texans offense needs to be better in the red zone. The defense just needs to be better in general with everything, but mainly bringing pressure to the quarterback and stopping the run. And honestly, if they can do all that, be better in the red zone, bring pressure to Trevor Lawrence, stop the run, the Texans, if not get the win tomorrow, will be a close game. If the Texans do everything I said they should do tomorrow, I believe the Houston Texans will win this game 26-23. But I don't believe the Texans will do all the things I said. I think the Texans will still make mistakes, even, especially with all the injuries they have. And I think the Houston Texans will lose this game in a very close one. I have the Houston Texans losing this one 27-20. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans somehow pull off an upset tomorrow against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Call me crazy, but I'm not being biased, maybe just a little bit. But what we've seen from C.J. Stroud, I don't count the Texans out, because C.J. Stroud has looked good in his first 2 weeks. I just think the big thing that matters with this team, and the only thing that's really holding them back from potentially going to get a win tomorrow, is the defense and the red zone. So you guys let me know your thoughts. That's it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. And then another thing that is important for tomorrow is the run game. Dameon Pierce needs to get involved. We need to see Dameon Pierce be better for the Houston Texans. I believe that is one huge thing you need to see to be better with the Houston Texans. Dameon Pierce needs to have a big game for the Texans tomorrow. if the Texans want to win. I think Dameon Pierce, we need to see him have over 50 rushing yards at least. I'm hoping for in the area of 55 to 80 rushing yards and maybe even his first touchdown of the year. Dameon Pierce has been terrible to start the year. I don't even think he has 80 rushing yards in the first 2 games. I think his first 2 games, I think he has week 1 he had 38 rushing yards. I think week 2 he had like 36 or 35. So he has like 75 rushing yards in the first 2 games. You guys let me know your thoughts. That's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace out. Go Texans.